Now, if USC actually has enough quarterbacks to finish the season, they may win the Pac-12 South Division. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Just seconds left at the LA Coliseum with the Trojans wrapping up a huge win over Utah right now, 30-23. A game that we analyzed from all angles this week, and thought that Utah had the decided advantage in most of the game matchups on the field, but it's USC that showed up with its playmakers on the outside, played a very tough rush defense up front in the middle, and USC gets a huge win for the program and for one Clay Helton, of course. Huge win for Clay Helton, 30-23 over Utah, and the Trojans just kneeling in victory formation at the Coliseum in front of a very sparse gathering at the LA Coliseum. I know the place holds 94,000 people, but still not a whole lot of people excited about USC football at this point. Of course, after 5 wins last year and the BYU loss on the road, USC trying to make it through this brutal stretch of its schedule, and it's surviving to date, and it pulls off an enormous win for Clay Helton, for the program, for this particular team in their efforts of winning the Pac-12 South Division. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do: is we analyze the big games, all the games across the Power Five and the Group of Five included each and every day. Welcome into a live stream featuring USC and Utah analysis. We'd like to invite your comments, obviously, in the live chat, but also your phone calls here at 860-325-3687. We have a few folks making their way into the live chat, so we invite your comments and your questions and so forth as I take a stab at analyzing this one, because it was a fun game to watch. The only drawback in this one is Kedon Slovis, the USC quarterback. You hate to see anybody get hurt, and so they're checking him out through concussion protocol right now, as it was only the second or third play of the game in which he was thrown to the turf, and he had to leave the game, and Matt Fink came in and performed beyond admirably, capably, heroically in a lot of ways, as USC gets a huge win. Clay Helton just gets a hug from one of his assistant coaches, because they know what this means to Clay Helton in particular in trying to survive this stretch and put USC football back on the map. And as it pertains just to the Pac-12 South Division, they are in the driver's seat, no question. Tons of football left to be played, and still a brutal stretch for the Trojans, but much of that, including Notre Dame, obviously outside the Pac-12. And they've picked up 2 enormous wins within the conference. Stanford, obviously not looking nearly as good as we thought, but this win against Utah at home, and now the Utes are 0-5. Kyle Whittingham is in Los Angeles. He's 3-6 all-time against USC, and the Utes have never won at the LA Coliseum. Of course, before they joined the Pac-12, there were next to no games for the Utes at the LA Coliseum, but they have had an unsuccessful stint once they've joined the Pac-12 in LA, and specifically against USC. Yes, USC showed some grit tonight, huh? Kedon Slovis knocked out of the game early in the first drive by Fotu. Matt Fink comes in, and the air raid offense would not be stopped. He utilized the USC playmakers, which we talked about yesterday and today in our pregame analysis of this game, is where USC on paper, now as it turned out on the field, they had the advantage at a number of spots, but on paper, USC had the advantage on the outside with Tyler Vaughns, Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and their great playmakers. Matt Fink's second touchdown that gave USC this 14-7 lead was a thing of beauty, as he was twirled around, bounced off the pass rusher, flushed to the right, threw it up for grabs. Not up for grabs. He knew his guy was downfield, but he threw it up there and let him make a play for the touchdown. And again, it was Pittman, Vaughns, and Ross St. Brown making some exceptional plays in this game. Michael Pittman caught 10 balls for 232 and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 5 catches for 68 and a touchdown. Tyler Vaughn's 4 receptions, 49 yards, and a touchdown. So their 3 big receivers all had a touchdown grab as the Trojans are signaling fight on the field, and maybe a few more fans will show up for USC's next home game, as they really didn't show up for this big matchup against Utah in the Pac-12 South. Yes, the Dodgers are at home, and there's probably a couple big concerts in town. The big downfall for Utah was that the secondary could not handle the playmakers, and also the offensive line was not up to the challenge. Tyler Huntley made a beautiful throw on the first touchdown series for Utah, 45 yards across the field, beautifully placed. Zach Moss, the other storyline in this game, obviously had to leave the game. Moss only carried 6 times for 20 yards. 6 carries for Zach Moss, one of the best running backs in college football, for 20 yards. He left with a shoulder injury. That was key. The run game on the perimeter for Utah looked like it was going to chew up USC all night. They kept going to the perimeter, which you would think Utah typically is stronger in the trenches than USC. That's the advantage they have, if anything, for them to be able to take on those athletes and get to the perimeter in the running game against USC was a bit surprising, but that certainly was what was working for the Utes, getting to the outside. Zach Moss kept getting hit in the backfield, would bounce off, would gain yardage that he should have no business of gaining before he had to leave the game again after only 6 carries. And hopefully Zach Moss is okay. Hopefully Keaton Slovis is okay as well. USC blocked a field goal. Elijah Griffin was all over the field. Unfortunately, he had to leave the game in the third quarter. He was banged up with some back spasms. But Elijah Griffin, while he was in the game for USC, was in the game all over the field. And how about Ufanga for USC was exceptional in this game. At one point, he had 13 tackles. He might have finished with 15 or 16 tackles on the day. And he was all over the place, making form tackles, beautiful tackles, open field tackles, doesn't get juked, tracks guys down, speed, burst, form tackling technique. This kid, Ufanga, is a tremendous player. He made the interception in week 1 against Fresno State in the end zone that saved the day for USC, only up 1 score late in the game against Fresno State. Kyle Whittingham, as we mentioned, drops to 3-6 against USC. He's 0-5 at the Coliseum. Second quarter, Utah had a 4th and 3. Tyler Huntley ran a short option, decided to keep the ball. Drake Jackson, another kid to be excited about if you're a USC follower. Drake Jackson, he was all over the field. The only thing he did wrong, and I would question it at times, is he picked up a couple late hits and some roughness penalties. There were flags all over the field for both teams, especially Utah, which I believe finished with 15 penalties on the night. The players that really stood out to me for USC, obviously the 3 wide receivers that we all knew about and have seen play for a number of years. They've been dominant. As long as they get quarterback play to get them the ball in the area, they're going to make plays. Pittman, Ross St. Brown, Vaughns. The play that opened up the game, of course, was right after halftime, in which USC was buried in its own territory. Matt Finks reversed his field, rolled left, threw that beautiful pass downfield to Michael Pittman, who went up, got the ball. Poorly played by one of the best safeties in the Pac-12, Julian Blackman. Pittman brings it down. He goes the distance, 78 yards for the touchdown. And USC had a 21-10 lead. Now, the game wasn't over. Of course, Utah came back and made it a game, but that was the play where USC was struggling on offense at the time. Utah got the ball first in the second half, couldn't do anything with it, but they pinned USC deep. Trojans get a key first down on 3rd and 5. Then they get the big play to Pittman for 77 yards in the touchdown and break it open 21-10. Again, Still plenty of football left to be played, but that gave them some cushion, got them out of a bad field position spot. And Zach Moss goes down for Utah. That's a negative. We'll see how his shoulder is in the coming weeks. The offensive line looked atrocious. Even when they gained yardage on the ground, it was the running backs generally picking up most of that yardage on their own. The offensive linemen just not doing the job. So the question was whether Utah was a college football playoff team. That was maybe the hype on the network that was overplayed all week and leading into this game during the pregame. Utah is not a college football playoff type team. Even if they would have won this game by 10 points instead of losing by 7, I would say that Utah is not a college football playoff type team. That's pretty evident from their inability to block up front, both in pass protection and in the running game. And the playmakers on the outside are better than what they usually have, but not up to that elite level. And their secondary looked bad. I know that USC's loaded on the outside with Pittman, Ross A. Brown, and with Vaughns. And those guys are going to make plays. They've got better ball skills than even the best defensive backs in the country. But that Utah secondary got shredded, especially since USC didn't have a running game. So USC was able to overcome the turnover battle. The turnover margin was against them. They basically rushed for nothing until, ironically, late in the game when they were protecting the lead. Once they went up 30-20, they suddenly could move the ball on the ground. The rushing attack started to work. Marquee Step looked good with a couple carries there. Stephen Carr had some remarkable carries that aren't going to show up in any highlight films or in the box score because they didn't go very far. But he had a couple carries in which he could have lost 6 or 8 yards, and he bounced it for a 2 or 3 or 5 yard gain. So Stephen Carr finished. It's not going to show up here as much of anything. Yeah, 3 carries for a negative 16 yards for Stephen Carr. Well, he did have the big fumble when USC was up 14-7 in the red zone, looking like they would possibly take it to 21-7. Stephen Carr had the fumble that lost about 20 yards. So there went his rushing effort for the night statistically. But I was impressed with the USC ability to run the ball when it counted the last 2 drives of the game. When they could not run it at all, they had 5 rushing yards at one point late in the game, that they could run it for first downs and protect their lead, kill the clock, and keep Utah's offense off the field. Tyler Huntley's a gamer. He's a really good quarterback. I didn't really see any mistakes out of him that I can remember. He's not an elite quarterback, Trevor Lawrence to a Tagovailoa type quarterback, but he's exceptional. He's very good. He's a top 10 to 15 quarterback in the nation. He's very elusive. He kept drives going a number of times on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, in which he was able to pick up first downs. All right. I have exhausted, I believe, my notes. I've taken all sorts of notes. This is what I do during the games, and I could take you blow by blow through my notes, but you would be rather bored. So, yeah, Fink the bomb to Pittman. Boy, what an electric play that was. 77 yards. Again, Ufanga, Griffin in the USC secondary are exceptional, especially Ufanga. Griffin had to leave the game. So USC, this has been the issue with USC since the probation and the roster issues with the scholarship reductions, is in spots. They are so good. They're elite good, but they still have no depth. And in other spots, other units, they're marginal. And this continues to be the case. Let me see what comments you guys have. And of course, the phone lines are open. Turner Kirby, good to see you. This is the first time I've seen your handle on our show. So, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I am going to guess that you're a USC fan. You're excited about USC being back. You're USC. You have high standards, Turner. Remember, high standards. You beat Utah. You beat Stanford, a bad Stanford team, the worst Stanford team in 10 years. So, Colby, did USC do more right than Utah did wrong on the other way around? I believe that USC did more than Utah did wrong. Utah looked bad in two areas. Defensive secondary against an exceptional wide receiver core, albeit, and their offensive line blocking in both pass protection and run game was pretty bad. But man, that Drake Jackson can play. Did you see that safety? Did you see the move he made on the guard and the tackle inside, the center and the guard inside on that safety? And he lit up Tyler Huntley. He was there like that. Pillai needs some work still. Man, he missed a lot of tackles. Cam Lifestyles. Austin Keynes, hey, Mark at work. Who won? Who won? USC 30, Utah 23. Austin's, thanks for checking in. McD Sports 4 is excited for another college football Saturday. USC has a quarterback. Well, this might be the problem, though, McD Sports. They've got one quarterback. Their backup quarterback, as it stands, if Slovis is still hurt next week, their backup quarterback is a safety. His number is 27. Number 27 as your backup quarterback is not a good sign. Austin Keynes, man, as a Miami fan and being down in South Florida, I really wanted Zach Moss and Hundley to sign with Miami. Yep, both exceptional players. Can you imagine Miami right now with Tyler Huntley at quarterback? Zach Moss would be a great addition. But, of course, the Miami run game at the running back position is fine, but Zach Moss would be the headliner, even above, I believe, DJ Dallas. Patrick Ives, Iowa is the biggest sleeper in the nation. Okay. Brandon likes USC. Shanktopotamus, I watched Boise State versus Air Force. So I checked in on that game during the breaks. The last I saw was that Boise was up, I believe, 23-13 sometime in the fourth quarter. So maybe they have held on. All right, Utah, the Pac-12 South Division champion in 2018, and the pick of the media to get back to the championship game and actually win the Pac-12. The pick from me to make it to the Pac-12 championship game and play Oregon goes down tonight at the Coliseum, 30-23, as USC looks mighty impressive and showed some fight, showed some bounce back against adversity, some resilience as their quarterback went down in the first series, and Matt Fink, with only 18 career attempts, had to step in and play well. Matt Fink's line, and I believe this is the final line. Yes, 21 of 30, 351 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And he bounced back from the INT to throw the 77-yard touchdown pass on the next series. This is, of course, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thanks for stopping by. If you love college football, if you're a hardcore fan and you love the game that we love, and even if you're just someone who watches college football during the season, shuts off the news, the analysis, everything else once the national championship game is played, and then tunes back in during the season, hey, it's in season, so we invite you to lock it in right here. And, of course, as somebody reminds me with a call, the phone lines are open. I will get the number on the screen, 860-325-3687. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4.
Hey, McD, how are you?
Doing great. You?
I'm good. It should be a great day of college football tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait. And we got off to a good start tonight with this Utah-USC game.
Yes, absolutely. I am off to a 1-0 start, taking USC +4.
I got this game wrong, but the good news is that I got the other 3 games correct. So I'm 3-1 right now. So.
All right. Well done.
But I want to talk about the Pac-12 in general.
Okay.
After this, because after this game, the Pac-12 all of a sudden the Pac-12 is wide open, in my opinion, in both divisions. I look at the South. I think it's between Utah, USC, and Arizona State right now. and maybe Colorado. And then, well, I mean, Colorado. I know Colorado lost to Air Force, but they did beat Nebraska. I mean, you can't sit there and say that's not a legit win.
Well, I can say that I believe Nebraska is a decent team, but that has yet to be played out on the field. So we don't know how good the Colorado win is over Nebraska. Just like a lot of wins across the country, the season's going to have to unfold for us to be able to rate the wins. Of course, mathematically, everybody's in the division race. Nobody's eliminated. So everybody's in the race, but I would not consider Colorado a contender for the Pac-12 South, even though I think it's the worst, maybe the second worst division in college football.
True. USC, their next two games at Washington and at Notre Dame, so they might be dropping the next two, even though Cal went up to Washington and beat them. The Pac-12 North is wide open as well, with Washington, Oregon, Cal, and Washington State. In my opinion, I don't think Stanford is really that good, and I'm not going to talk about the other team in that Pac-12 North.
Yeah, Stanford doesn't look good. Of course, they got blown out by SC. Then they go down to Central Florida, and I thought that they might have a bounce back. I expected them to lose, but not get completely annihilated as they did. It was closer on the scoreboard than it actually was. But this is why we have to see the games play out. Think about USC's schedule when we looked at it preseason and we saw, wow, the first 6 games are really tough. So the worst team on paper in those first 6 games, BYU. And we thought, well, they've got to play Stanford. They've got to play Utah. Those are going to be difficult games. They're probably going to lose that. If they beat anyone, they're going to beat BYU. Well, it turns out the exact opposite. And now Notre Dame's one of those difficult games. That doesn't count toward the Pac-12. But as you mentioned, Washington coming up is going to be a difficult one to deal with. But USC's off to a 2-0 start, and they beat the team that most likely is going to be their chief competitor for the division championship. Now, Arizona State obviously won a big game at Michigan State. That doesn't count, but gives us indication that the Sun Devils may have something to say, and they play your Colorado Buffs tomorrow.
Correct. That's going to probably be a elimination game right there. I'm just very intrigued by this Pac-12 because it's going to be a wide open race to see who gets to the Rose Bowl this year. It's going to be really interesting to see because this USC team is surprising me. I'm telling you, I did not see this coming at all.
This is the first game I can remember in a long time that a wide receiver core, I don't want to say they won the game because USC was so good in other aspects of the game. I thought their secondary played extremely well. Their rush defense up the middle, Drake Jackson was phenomenal. Of course, the quarterback play, but it was basically just the ability of the quarterback to get the ball near in the area of those 3 wide receivers, and they made play after play after play after big play the whole night.
Correct. 2 other quick notes before I let you go. I know you're asking the score for the Boise State game. They beat Air Force 30-19. So they were able to hold on and get the win there. And one other quick note I want to bring up. I noticed this in the Boise State game and in the USC game. The refs are not letting these teams play. Like Utah and USC are 2 physical teams, especially Utah, and they will not let them play. Like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. When USC was driving down the field to get that touchdown to make it 30-20, that pass interference call was not pass interference at all. That was a pretty bad call.
Yes. That was a big disappointment in this game. I was highly entertained by this game. I thought it was hard fought. There were big plays. There was defense. There was everything you could want in this game, except there were flags on the field constantly. Now, if the players are committing penalties, they need to be called. But yes, there was a late hit called on SC. One of the safeties blitzed. It was a clean hit. It was right as the quarterback was delivering the ball. Huntley that was a bad call. There were bad calls. There were probably, I know late in the game, Utah had 15 penalties in this game. Let's see what the
I've heard of from them.
Yeah, they're a more disciplined team than that. They finished with 16 penalties, and USC had 11. There were 237 yards of penalties in this game. I'm going to say that out of those 27 penalties, that 7 or 8 of them were not called for, should not have been called.
I agree. And it was also in the Boise State game, and also in the Titans-Jaguars game, I thought we were seeing that as well. But that's the NFL, and I'm not going to get into some of their rules because I'll be ranting all night long, and I'm tired. I want to go to bed, so that's why I'm going to let you go, Mark. And thanks for taking my call, and hopefully you'll be live tomorrow because I really want to talk about those 3 big games tomorrow, at least the big 3. Maybe even Oklahoma State and Texas.
What's your big 3? My big 3 is Georgia, Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin. Who's your third big game?
Auburn,
Okay.
A&M.
Gotcha. I'm with you. Excellent. McD, thanks so much for the call, man. Enjoy the games tomorrow. We'll be live.
Okay. Can't wait.
Sounds good, man. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I think you may have caught the number. I'll get it up there. 860-325-3687 is our number. Want to remind you also that the super chat is available. What that does is help us build the channel. For many of you that have been watching me for quite some time, you understand what the vision, what the goal, what the objective is here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We deliver 120 to 150 videos and live streams a month. Think about that. And I don't do this all the time. So think how much better this channel could be if I did this all the time, full throttle, and had the support. So that's what we are attempting to do there as I'm taking calls. And somebody called, but the call did not go through. Maybe they hung up or possibly something happened. All right, 860-325-3687. Want to remind you that my week 4 predictions are available exclusively at our Voice of College Football community. The link is not below during this live stream, but it's on all the videos in the description section of all the videos. You can find the link. And I picked this USC game correctly at +4 for the Trojans. That puts me now at 45-28 against the spread this season. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Matt.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good. I called about a week ago with my conference rankings.
Yes, you did with the American.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Have you dug into that a little bit more?
Well, you know what I did this week was I went through all the conferences and I went through their Power 5 records, their Group of 5 records against their big wins. So I looked at, okay, where were the huge games? You know, the Clemson, Texas A&M type games, the Auburn, Oregon games, and did they win those games? And then were there any unexpected wins like a North Carolina at the time beating South Carolina as a 12-point underdog? Those kind of games. Were there embarrassing losses, and listing those and trying to compare those? The Tennessee's losing to Georgia State, Mizzou falling to Wyoming, these kind of games. And so I released a video. I started my rankings from the bottom. I released a video on the ACC. I released a video on the Pac-12. And if you know anything about my channel and what I'm producing here, I got a bit behind, and I've been just churning out all these game preview videos. So I did not finish that series. I, like you, I had an issue. I would really need to dissect the Big 10 versus the Big 12. I think it's very close. And but in terms of the American and where they slot, I think you had some valid points, but I couldn't really give any metrics to it and just didn't get the time.
Okay, yeah. And I actually, if I could take it back, I probably would put the American 5th. I think the Pac-12 is a little bit better, but I definitely think they're overall better than the ACC. I don't think the ACC is good at all.
No, the ACC is pretty awful. The ACC, if you look at it, right now they're either 2-7 or 2-8 against the other 4 conferences. And by the looks of it, Clemson, South Carolina, that is going to be the only game that the ACC is going to be favored in the rest of the season. Notre Dame should beat at least 3, if not all 4 ACC opponents. Virginia would have the best shot against them. And the ACC is probably going to lose the rest of those matchups. And they are projected, I'm looking at a 4-13 or 3-14 showing against the other 4 conferences.
Yeah, that's pretty pathetic. I mean, I think you could probably take Memphis or Tulane out of the American and put them in the division that Clemson's not in, and they could probably play Clemson in the ACC championship game.
That would be fascinating to see. That would be fascinating to see. You really think Tulane?
I don't know. They got a lot of transfers. That Jalen McCluskey that made that
sure.
He's from Oklahoma State transfer. He's a good player. I watched him. I was pretty impressed. But then again, I don't know. Houston, the jury's still out on them, so I don't know.
No, it's really good. What would be great is if you would go through the American Conference, and if you ranked the teams 1 through 14. If you want to send me that comment, if you feel like doing it, if you don't do it. But if you want to put that in the if you want to put that in the comment section, I would love to get out the big board, get out the whiteboard, and we would line up the ACC 1 through 14 and the American 1 through 14, and just say, okay, who's going to win these matchups if we play 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2 on down the line. And I think it would be a pretty interesting conversation.
No, I'll definitely do that. I'll put that in the comments.
Cool.
Another thing, do you think even if Clay Helton wins the Pac-12, he's gone? Because I think that's wrong. Because what I've seen so far, the players are playing for him. They really are. I mean, I think they could have given up on him and saw the right wall, but they seem to be playing for him.
Yeah, they're playing for him. They were playing hard tonight, and they played hard at BYU last week. They just made mistakes, and they're out there with a third-string quarterback playing Utah. It's pretty impressive what they pulled off tonight.
Yeah, it is. And that kid, he wasn't super impressive, but he had a lot of moxie. He didn't really get flustered.
Not at all. Yeah, especially against that pass rush.
I feel like that's wrong if they do that.
Yeah, well, what's the right thing to do versus what they're going to do, believing that they need to be at a certain place in college football? I don't know where their heads are in terms of what's going to be available, who's going to be available, versus them weighing where should we be as a program, and is Clay Helton the guy to get us to the next level?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if he's that guy, but I mean, it'd be hard for me to fire a guy if he won the Pac-12. Even though the Pac-12 isn't what it used to be, it's still, respectable, at least this year.
Yeah, see, that's the difficult call to make, because we're not talking about, your factory worker, your office worker, that, okay, are they doing the job? We're paying them $35,000 a year. Are they doing the job? Sure, they're doing the job. They come in, they punch the clock, and they're doing a decent job. We're going to keep them around. He's being paid, I don't know what his specific salary, but I'll take Mark Richt and Les Miles, for example. When they were being paid top 3, top 4 in the nation at LSU and Georgia, yeah, if you look at their numbers, winning 10 games a year, contending for division championships, sometimes playing in the SEC championship game, and in Les Miles' case, obviously winning a national championship and getting back to a BCS championship game. Against that criteria, you would say, yeah, they're doing the job. How could you possibly fire a coach who keeps going 10-3? But based on the level that they're being paid as elite coaches that are supposed to be competing for championships most of the time, $7.5 million a year. So that justifies the firing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting who they hire as their athletic director. That'll say a lot about if they're going to go for Urban Meyer or not, too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I would think that they would have some way of getting into the offseason knowing whether he is seriously interested in the job or not.
Yeah, well, he's already put out things like you can kind of see it creeping into his mind where he said, I think a couple of days ago, he said he's missing it. Like he feels a calling back to it or something like that. I read a headline about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fascinating. Yep.
Do you think this sealed the Pac-12's fate that they're not going to make the college football playoff again?
Sure looks like it by all reasonable measures. Now, we can construct a situation in which they would make it, of course, especially since the likes of Cal and Washington State are still undefeated. But from a purely wins and losses standpoint, those are the two best hopes. But they're not the teams that we would think would be capable of running the table the rest of the way. Cal and Washington State. I think most people would still consider, as I would, the best teams in the conference to be some collection of Utah, Oregon, and Washington.
Yeah.
But and even though USC won this game tonight, it doesn't completely convince me that they're better than Utah. They won the game fair and square. The game was at home, and Utah is a much different team at home than they are on the road. But I still think that this division's up for grabs. This division's not going to be won most likely with 0 or 1 losses as a conference record. Utah won it last year at 6-3. So there's a lot of losses to go around this division still. So USC's in great position because they're 1 game up on Utah, plus they've got the tiebreaker, but it's still not over. They've got a lot of tough games to go, and Arizona State looks like they may have something to say about it. But in terms of the playoff, it's difficult. Yep.
Yeah. And just because of the way the AP poll set up and everything, how there's a preseason pool and everything, I think even if Cal were to go undefeated, which I don't think is going to happen because they play Oregon on the road and Utah on the road, but if they went undefeated, I don't even think they'd make the college football playoff. I just don't.
That would be a travesty. Because then that would.
I agree, but I think it's mostly like just looking at the brand and the preseason rankings and everything. They weren't ranked. I just don't see that they could jump someone like if Georgia goes undefeated, Alabama goes undefeated, and I think the loser gets in.
Well, the playoff committee tells us that it has nothing to do with who needs to leapfrog or jump somebody else. That they construct the standings, the rankings each and every week. From the beginning, from the start. And if that would happen, if Cal would go undefeated, Cal or Washington State would go undefeated and not make the college football playoff while there are 1-loss teams in the college football playoff, then they really need to reconstruct the system, because if you're going to go undefeated as a major conference champion, I don't know what else you can do. And having the preseason perception invade the final analysis in December that much, you talk about a broken system. I'm not saying you're wrong. I wouldn't be surprised either, but that would be horrendous. That would be a farce.
No, I agree. It would be.
Then the games really don't count. It's really about preseason perception.
Yeah, and what I've seen from Cal, their defense is good enough, but I don't know if they can get enough from their offense.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think they're that good. But just for argument's sake, if they would win out, they would have wins against Washington State, Oregon, and Stanford, of course, and then whomever they play in the South. I forget who they miss this year. But, yeah, their resume would not have that signature non-conference win like Oregon had a chance at with Auburn. They play Ole Miss tomorrow, and that's certainly not the game to hang your hat on for a college football playoff nomination.
Yeah, just to ask, who do you have winning that game? Did you bet on that game?
I did. I'm contractually.
I took Cal minus, I think, 1.
Was it -1? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Like Cal on the road. Okay. Pretty much a pick'em game.
Yeah, even though, the West Coast coming to the East Coast, that's what that worries me, but they're just a much better team than Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think so. Matt. All right, sir. Anything else?
I'll ask one more question. So I'm looking at Ohio State's schedule, and preseason-wise, you would have thought it's a pretty decent schedule, but looking at it right now, I don't see a loss. And do you see a loss?
Well, think about that, Matt. Do we ever see losses in Ohio State's schedule typically? Did anyone think that they were going to they were 17-point favorite against Purdue, they were a 17-point favorite against Iowa the last 2 years?
That's true. Yes.
So
I mean,
there have been almost 10 games already played as
could trip up at Nebraska.
Sure. They could trip up at Nebraska. Do I expect it? No, not based on the way the two teams have played thus far. But I got to say, if we would go back to 2017 and see how Iowa was playing prior to Ohio State coming in, they certainly had their 3 or 4 losses, as did Purdue last year.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing is, they only have 3 more road games after that. They're at Northwestern, at Rutgers. They're not losing that game, and then at Michigan, so they could lose that game. But I mean, if they don't lose at Nebraska, or Michigan, I guess I don't really see a loss because Northwestern, Hunter Johnson has played absolutely terrible so far.
I hear what you're saying. I completely am on board with the analysis based on how they've looked thus far, and we know Ohio State's a much more talented team than all those teams, excluding Michigan. But it's college football. It's sports. Just go through Clemson's playoff appearances. Clemson lost to a 5-loss Pitt team and won the national championship. They lost to a 8-loss Syracuse team and made the college football playoff. Alabama back-to-back years made the college football playoff and won a national championship, losing to 3- and 4-loss Ole Miss teams. And, of course, the 2 Ohio State games the last 2 years. So, no, I can't I may go out on a limb and predict that game to happen and take a shot at it happening. But from a team standpoint, not a road home aspect where I understand we're looking for that road game, but I think Penn State and Wisconsin probably have the best teams capable of beating Ohio State right now.
Yeah, probably. Well, I'm going to let you go. I'll leave that comment in the comments section for you.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
We got Matt, who was making the claim last week that the American Conference might be better than some of the Power 5 conferences, and specifically the ACC, and I can see it. So what I've asked Matt to do is leave a ranking of the American Conference 1 through 14 in the comment section. We'll put them up on the big board against my rankings for the ACC 1 through 14, and we'll just have a little discussion as to who would win these matchups. 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, and so forth. This Havoc is tired, beat down, dragging. Anthony, boy, it was a good game, though, Anthony, wasn't it? I know it was the Pac-12, and it's a joke. I don't think it's a joke. It's better than the ACC. No, they're not going to have a college football playoff participant. The rest of the other leagues would have to implode, but it's not a joke. They play some decent football in the Pac-12. It's the 4th best conference.
The call will start at the beep.
Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
This is Eli.
Hey, Eli. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. What's going on?
So one of the things. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with all this talk of the college football playoff, one of the things I've been kind of wondering is, what do you think are the odds are that they could end up putting 3 SEC teams in the playoff this year?
Well, what would have to happen, obviously, is that there would have to be implosion in the other leagues. You'd have to have 2 lost champions. And then you've got to have a scenario in which Georgia and Alabama win out. LSU's only losses to Alabama. Of course, LSU's already notched an important, impressive win against Texas. And there you've got 3 SEC teams at 12-1, 12-1, and 12-1. You've got them all at you've got a 13-0, a 12-1, and a 11-1 is what you would have. So yeah, we can. we can construct anything. We've only played 3 games, Eli, so I can construct 2 Pac-12 teams making the college football playoff at this point. I understand that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. And your scenario is far more likely than any league getting 2 or more teams in. I get it, what you're shooting for. But through 3 weeks, we can construct just about anything.
Right, but it's like honestly, who do you see LSU losing to besides Alabama? Like, I mean, maybe Auburn, but I think they should clearly be favored in that one. Like, I just go through the rest of the schedule, and like the only one I see them being underdogs in is Alabama. And who do you see being Alabama in the regular season, or Georgia for that matter?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. You're going by favorite versus underdog status, but this is college football. There are going to be upsets.
Right.
20 to 22% of the top 25 games are upsets. So we see this every year. There are going to be games that we don't even count on. Right now, if we envision LSU losing a game after Alabama, it would be against either Florida, Texas A&M, or Auburn. Right? And the way that LSU has looked, they've looked much better than those teams.
Yeah.
But again, it's a week-to-week sport, and I hear what you're saying. I think LSU's one of the top 5 teams in the country too, and I think Georgia and Alabama are. I think those 3, Clemson and Ohio State, are the 5 most talented and are playing the best football right now. Of course, the Buckeyes have not played anyone, neither has Alabama. But I think those are the 5 best teams in the country. So I understand your question. You're trying to create a 3 SEC scenario to see if that could happen. Sure, it could happen. We can construct that scenario.
Could you imagine the riot, the outrage if that actually did happen?
Again, it could happen, but if I would understand, even though I would be against it, I would understand if that played out exactly as we just served it up. One team's undefeated, the other 2 have 1 loss, and then there are 2 lost champions in the other leagues, or maybe Clemson is the other team that makes it. And there's 2 lost champions in the Pac-12, the Big 10, and the Big 12. I still wouldn't agree with it, but I would understand it because they all have better records and play in most likely the best league. Yeah, that would cause me to go on a rampage and really trash this system.
Yeah, because like what if Texas end up winning the Big 12 at 12-1, then you have LSU at 11-1, and they give LSU the benefit of that because they beat Texas in a head-to-head matchup.
Sure.
You see that?
Yep.
And now, as far as the Big 10 is concerned, I don't know. I don't know if I see 2 losses for Ohio. Well, actually, maybe I do. Maybe they lose to Michigan, then they lose to Wisconsin, the Big 10 championship game or something. That would be a lot of chaos.
Well, yeah, if the best team in the Big 10 loses the championship game, then the Big 10's going to be in serious trouble. I don't see any team coming out of the West with an excellent record. Iowa might have the best team, but they've got a brutal schedule.
Yeah, Wisconsin does too with their crossovers, but at least their running back looks like a stud. So I could see them maybe. I could see where they could pull off an upset, get to the Big 10 championship game, and pull off an upset over Ohio State. Maybe they lose some in the regular season and beat them, and then maybe Ohio State, I don't know. Maybe it just has some random loss. They always seem to struggle with Western teams for some reason.
Yeah, they have twice.
I mean, Iowa and Purdue just absolutely beat the crap out of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's happened twice.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like you never know. So it is possible that the Big 12 champ could be like a 2-loss team or something like that. And then obviously we're pretty much assuming Clemson probably goes undefeated. Like, can you see anyone on the I just don't see anyone that's be capable of beating them at this point. Their schedule is just weak sauce.
Yeah, they've already played the best team on the schedule, and they played the team that was the second best team in the ACC last year. So the best team that they've got left on their schedule is probably NC State. That's probably the best team on their schedule. NC State, or well, you can put a net over Wake Forest, Boston College, NC State, and Florida State. And Boston College just lost to Kansas by 4 scores last weekend. And NC State just lost to West Virginia. NC State lost to West Virginia by 17 points last week. The ACC is awful.
And this is another thing I was thinking, like, okay, is Clemson's schedule even tougher than UCS? I mean, because I honestly think that
It's a good call.
American Athletic is better than the ACC. You know, I mean, the ACC, yeah, they're great at basketball, but that's what their name is. They're a basketball conference, and other than Clemson, they should just stick to their basketball.
Is UCF's schedule better than Clemson's? That you got yourself a video topic right there, because UCF is going to have to go undefeated. And I heard somebody make the claim yesterday or today that UCF needs to bulk up their schedule and play better teams. And my response was, well, they scheduled Pitt and Stanford this year. I know that they didn't schedule Ohio State and Oklahoma, but Stanford's usually much better than they are right now. But if you look at the American Conference, and if you look at the ACC, and then if you look at UCF playing Pitt and Stanford out of conference versus Clemson just taking on Texas A&M and South Carolina, yeah, they're pretty comparable schedules. So if UCF goes undefeated against just as good a schedule as Clemson going undefeated against their schedule, there's your argument right there.
And I would say, like, okay, Houston's not as good as I thought they were. I'll admit that. I thought
Sure.
they were going to be really good this year, but they've kind of disappointed. But Cincinnati, I don't know. They're still a pretty decent team, and they play them in Cincinnati on Friday night. I think that's a pretty quality opponent. And if they play Memphis in the, I think Memphis might be the best team in the other division. I mean, remember they beat Ole Miss, and I think that would be a quality win too. I mean, I know it's not by Clemson's fault that the ACC is garbage, but still, and I mean, Texas A&M was a pretty good win. They beat South Carolina, and they lost to, I don't know, South Carolina's not even that good.
So the rest of UCF's schedule is at Pitt, UConn, they're horrible. At Cincinnati, not as good as we thought they might be. East Carolina, pretty bad. Temple, who beat Maryland, of course, last week. They've got to play them on the road. They've got the Houston game you mentioned. Tulsa on the road, Tulane on the road, and USF, and then they'll play Memphis in the championship game most likely. Yeah, Memphis or Tulane.
Pretty good this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're like people dog them on their schedule, but it would absolutely be like okay, it's just all that stupid Power 5 bias that's like they're just gonna deny UCF a chance to get into the playoffs, but they're gonna allow one-loss teams, and I don't know, or like one-loss teams that don't even win their conference. Like, I mean, think about it, 2017. Alabama didn't even deserve to be in the playoffs because they didn't even win their conference, and they lost to Auburn, and UCF went undefeated.
You are right. I don't know if you were watching me. I was just going to say, I don't know if you were watching me at that point, but believe me, I went on a rampage for a week about that.
Yeah, I don't think I was yet.
I was on a rampage that week. Yes, because that's it's just a moving target with the qualifications for the college football playoff. It changes every year.
Okay, one last question I'd like to ask, and I'll let you go. Like, what would be your thoughts on having a 16-team playoff where all the conference champions Power 5 and Group of 5 plus 6 at-large teams and make it like March Madness?
So, Eli, that's exactly what I've proposed in the past. I've shot a number of videos, and that's exactly what, if we're not taking player safety or class schedules or any of that into consideration, if we're just, first of all, focusing on football, talking football, and even the class schedules, the other, as you well know, the other levels of football are able to accommodate 16-team playoffs. And I put together a schedule once and was able to accommodate an 11-game season, a conference championship game, give the kids 2 weeks off for exams, and then get them back on the field for a 16-team playoff. And that, what you're saying right there, is exactly what I would do. There needs to be a decision made to either say, we are going to legitimately include the group of 5. Legitimately. It's a farce to say that they're included. They're not included. If you have teams going undefeated and they can't make the playoff, then they're not included. So either include them and say, we're going to treat everyone equally, or you exclude them and say, go play your own championship. We're going to play a Power 5 championship. But if you're going to include everyone, I would take all the conference champions, all 10 conferences, and then I would take a wild card system and I would put together some type of metric that would rank the teams statistically and take the best 6 wild card teams. So it would certainly be weighted toward the Power 5. And of course, people would complain that the Sun Belt champion is like the 60th or 70th best team in the country. I don't care about that. So the 16 best teams wouldn't be in the playoff. About the 12 best teams in the country would be there. And then there would be like the 35th best team in the country, and then like the 60th best team in the country, and then like the 70th best team in the country. But that's fine. That's what you earn for. You're earning a champion. You have earned the right. And my favorite line in all this is, if they want to continue this farce of a system, what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee needs to do next summer is they need to go on a tour to all the group of 5 August camps and visit with the teams and tell them, we know you're out here in 95-degree heat, busting your tails, puking every other day, doing everything you can to win, but we're going to have to let you know, this is an announcement that even if you win every game by 50-0, you have no way in hell of making the college football playoff. Thank you. Goodbye. And they would need to make that announcement to every team in person.
Yeah, well, I mean, the FCS has 24 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it can be done. And I agree, like, if they're worried about stuff like shorten the regular season to 11, I mean, how many pointless games do you see between, like, some big Power 5 team and some overmatched FCS game? I mean, that's not what I want to watch.
Yeah. I gotcha. Right. And would there be playoff games that, especially in the first round, that would be complete blowouts? Yes, there would. There absolutely would. There would be the Alabama Appalachian State first round game that would most notably be a blowout. But wouldn't it be exciting? It might take 5 years, but wouldn't it be exciting to see the MAC champion has Ohio State on the ropes in the fourth quarter? It's 24-21 with 3 minutes left. It would happen at some point, and it would be ecstatic. It would be great.
I mean, that's why the beauty of March Madness, if you get all these Cinderella stories, like, I mean, who had even heard of Loyola Chicago until a couple years ago?
Sure.
And then I guess, think about last year. I think there's one big upside could have seen. I think Appalachian State would have probably been seeded number 14, and Notre Dame would have been seeded 3. And I think App State would have actually had a real chance of knocking off the Irish.
Yeah, they could have.
I mean, they almost beat Penn State last year.
Yep.
They probably should have won that game.
Yep. All right, Eli.
What was that?
Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for taking it.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We appreciate you stopping by to talk Utah and USC and take your calls on the college football playoff or whatever else you want to talk about in Power 5 football and the group of 5, of course. Somebody's asking about my top 27. It just turned out to be 27 because I was having a little fun with it, and I had a couple other teams that I was ranking and didn't want to leave them off. So you can find that by simply looking at the videos. It's probably about 10 videos deep at this point. Or you can go to the front page of my channel and just go to the search bar, not used Dexter, not used, and just search for it. That's the best way to do it, or go about 10 videos deep. Want to remind everyone that you can get my Week 4 college football predictions two ways. You can go to the description section of any video, including this one, not right this second, because I've got to populate it. Unfortunately, the live streams don't populate the description section. I've got to go back and manually put it in. But if you go to the description section of any video and grab the link next to Voice of College Football Community, you get my Week 4 predictions. You get my predictions each and every week. And with the USC win tonight at +4 against Utah, I'm now 45-28 against the spread. Do the math, 62% against the spread is pretty darn good. All right, the other way you can do it this week, and for one try, is you can text the keyword football. Keyword is football. Text 474747. Text 474747. This isn't the best worded graphic I've ever put up here, but we'll go with it. So text 474747. Put in the keyword football, and you get my Week 4 predictions. So you're going to see my prediction of USC covering the spread against Utah. I did pick Utah to win the game, but I picked USC against the spread +4. And then you'll get the rest of my Saturday predictions as well. All the top 25 games, I think there are 27 games predicted right there. Text 474747 keyword football to get my picks. Or again, you can just go to the link next to Voice of College Football Community in the description section of any of the videos, and you sign up right there and you get my predictions. And I appreciate the people that have signed up just today. A few people have signed up just today for our Voice of College Football Community, which in addition to the predictions also includes a lot of specialty content for you. All right, our number's 860-325-3687. Let me check out the comments. Maybe I'll take them in reverse. Well, if I take them in reverse, then I've got to be careful with the comments, because if I go too far up, then I can't reverse it, unfortunately. So I apologize. Even though you can see all the comments on YouTube, I can't see them all here. I can only go 10 or 20 back. Let's take a call. Mark Rogers TV, the Voice of College Football.
The call will start at the beep.
All right, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Reasonable Cup. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
No, doing okay. Just got home from work and saw you were live streaming, so I thought I'd give you a call. So you guys were talking about the playoff system.
Yeah, people are already starting to talk about the playoff system.
Well, that's always a fun topic every single year when it comes up, right?
Yeah, this guy that just called me wanted to get 3 SEC teams into the playoff.
Well, there is a path to that this year if Texas wins the Big 12, and then they're up against an 11-1 LSU who beat them in their own house. You would obviously have to have some chaos go on in the Big Ten for that to happen, but there is a possibility for that right now.
Well,
they certainly laid out the groundwork for it.
Well, I could get 2 Pac-12 teams into the playoffs right now. We played 3 games.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
we can construct all sorts of scenarios.
I guess I was going towards a scenario. What I meant was it actually is somewhat likely. The only likely team and the only scenario that I would see realistic for Pac-12 to get in right now is Utah. Whether that's fair or not, that's a different discussion.
You think Utah has the best chance of making the playoff in the Pac-12?
Yes, because they're the only undefeated team that could potentially get to 13-0. Washington and Oregon have already ruined that.
So Utah played tonight. You understand that, right?
Yeah. Is the game over yet?
Yes. That's the title of our analysis tonight, Reasonable Gump. It's the USC Utah instant analysis. And the instant analysis is that USC beat them.
They did?
Yep.
Okay, then. I'm going to have to retract that statement. And like I said, I just got home from work, so
okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good ball game.
Well, Clay Helton may keep his job then.
Yeah, there's no question what
you're. Retract that statement.
Well, there's no question what you're saying is that, yeah, certainly based on reputation and based on what is most likely the quality of the league, that the SEC has the best opportunity and the greatest probability of putting in multiple teams. Now, when people start talking about 3 teams, yeah, we can construct all sorts of scenarios, but for any league to get in 3 teams, and the SEC would be that league, then I don't know that there's enough live stream on YouTube for me to just go off and scream and holler and rant and rave for a week straight without shutting up. If any league got 3 teams, if any league getting 2 teams in this format shouldn't happen.
No, and I can't really say that I terribly disagree with that. I really just wish the committee would just come out and just say, look, this is what we're doing. Just be straightforward. Are you putting the best 4 teams in? Or are you putting the most deserving teams in? Are you putting the teams that didn't have really bad moments in the year in? Are you putting the teams with the greatest highs in the year in? I mean, just come out and just say what it is.
You know what I think it is, Reasonable Gump? I think it's basically...
What is it?
I think it is they truly are trying to select the 4 best teams in the country, but since they are charged with having some type of a system, they have to skew the system to fit their argument every year. So that's why another factor gets thrown in or taken out every year to fit their narrative, when all they're trying to do is select the 4 best teams. And they do say that at times. We're trying to select the 4 best teams. And just flat out say, I know we harped on and we emphasized conference champions last year, but it's not as important to us this year. But of course they can't say that. They're just trying to select the 4 best teams. And I truly think that that's what they're attempting to do. But they have to change the criteria in order to do so. You know, like if somebody asked you, who are the 4 best teams in college football, and then asked you to explain why, you may have a different reason this year than you did last year, than you did the year before, than you did the year before.
The problem, and I don't mean to, a lot of that makes sense. The main problem I have with that explanation is there is absolutely no one other than their fan bases that would have said Michigan State back in, 2016 was one of the 4 best teams.
Exactly.
And there was absolutely no one other than their fan base that would have said Notre Dame was one of the 4 best teams. They were undefeated, but no one watching them play, watching them almost blow it to USC in the last game, the regular season, no one watching them almost blow it to Vanderbilt at home, or just really any of their other games. No one thought that they were one of the 4 best teams, which is why I actually don't think that's what they're doing. I actually think that, and this has been somewhat consistent since the beginning, I think the committee is putting a lot more emphasis than anything on what was your lowest point? Like, which 4 teams did not have catastrophically low points in the season? So the Ohio State stuff for 2 years, I've given up over 50 points to ridiculous teams. That took them out. The Penn State one, they won the Big Ten and a head-to-head over Ohio State. would look back in the season and they gave up like either 40 or 50 something points to Michigan. That took them out. Okay. That's what I think they're doing. That's, of course, again, I wish they would just come out and confirm one way or the other, and with an explanation. But that seems to be the only thing that's consistent to me, is that they seem to disqualify, for lack of a better word, teams when they have a bad low point. You can even make the argument last year, Georgia had a bad low point against LSU. They got blown out. And so, that's just what I think's going on.
The only defense I'll make, or it's not even a defense, the only distinction I'll make is that the 3 games that you cite, the 2 Ohio State losses and the 1 Penn State loss, is that they were all against decent to good teams, not great teams, not top 15 teams, but decent to good teams, like bowl teams. Michigan State, the Michigan State team that made the playoff, and again, they earned it. They earned it as the Big Ten champion, but they weren't one of the 4 best teams. That team lost to a 5-7 Nebraska team. So you could either say, did you lose really badly to like an 8-4, a decent Iowa team, or even losing close to a 5-win Nebraska team? Should that disqualify? That didn't disqualify that year.
That is an interesting point. And I mean, hell, if we want to go along these lines, I gotta say, having the what were they, the 130th defense in the country, in like the literal dead last passing defense in the country. Oklahoma last year giving up 50 points a game. Even though they were winning those games, I almost got to think, if we want to talk about team lows, fielding half a team, in my book, should be disqualifying. I mean, I'll say it today. I said it 2 years ago, and I'll keep saying it. If Oklahoma had a mediocre defense, okay, not even a good one, if they had a mediocre defense, they would have won the last 2 national titles. Maybe not last year. Clemson was just ridiculously good last year. But they would have beaten Georgia the year before. Yeah. You know, all they needed was a mediocre defense. And then I don't think they would have had much problem with Alabama. But you field half a team and you can't win a playoff game. So,
I'm trying to think who's got a mediocre defense, but you could give them. I don't know. I keep thinking of good defenses, better defenses than what they have. But, maybe you trot out, you give them Missouri's defense. Here's Missouri's defense. Go play with them, and you could win a national championship. And that's one I didn't have an issue with Oklahoma getting in over Ohio State. I just thought it was indistinguishable. I had arguments that could be made on either side. And one of them had to be left out. And if Oklahoma would have been left out, I certainly would have been able to make the case that they should have gotten in over Ohio State, but I certainly made the case for Ohio State as well. The one thing that Ohio State had that Oklahoma didn't is they had the capability to play defense. They didn't field a good defensive team last year, but you could see it in certain games that they were the old Ohio State defense. Like those players that were on the field for Ohio State defensively ranked in the top 10 in the nation in defense the 3 previous years. Why they were the 71st rated defense was all coaching screw-ups. But when they showed up, they could play defense. But they had their Oklahoma games on defense, but they didn't do that every week.
Yeah, and I didn't have a problem with Oklahoma getting in either. The only thing I had a problem with was this narrative that it was already preordained, that Oklahoma just had to win against Texas and they were automatically in. I hated that narrative. If Oklahoma would have won by a field goal and Ohio State would have blown out Northwestern, then I think Ohio State would have and should have gotten in. But as it stands, they both played their teams somewhat evenly. Ohio State did beat Northwestern worse than Oklahoma beat Texas, but it's still It wasn't to the disparaging, like level that of the difference that should have catapulted the men.
Yeah.
I'll always have a problem with that the fact that Notre Dame got to sit out championship.
I know.
And also even if they were going to keep them in, they really should have been moved to the 4th spot. I mean, I know this really shouldn't have made much of a difference, but like there is an idea that the top seeded team gets to play the lowest seeded team in the playoff, right? Like in that system, you guys are just talking about number 1 would play number 16.
Sure.
Alabama would play Appalachian State.
Yeah.
All right. So in my opinion, it was pretty easy to tell that Alabama should have been playing Notre Dame round 1. All right, we earned it by going 13-0 and beating the likes of Georgia and LSU and Auburn and Texas A&M. Maybe not Auburn; they weren't that good, but still, you know what I mean.
Yep.
But I will say though, caution on the 16 teams, 32 teams, trying to build it like college basketball, March Madness is, because you do that, the regular season in college football will be gone, like it is in college basketball. No one cares about the regular season in college basketball. It doesn't matter. All anyone wants to do is make the tournament. I mean, so it would be a real shame if that happened to college football, because we have one of the coolest regular seasons out there. I think something does need to be done about prostituting these FCS schools to go have their players get beat up, by big schools just so the school can make a big paycheck. That's wrong in every sense of the word. But making it to where all you really have to do is have like a somewhat respectable record in the regular season just to get into a 32 team playoff, that I would not like that at all.
No, that's way too many. Yeah.
I think 8 teams is a good middle ground.
And the NCAA tournament, just from a television standpoint, there are a zillion teams playing all at once, and it's basketball, and it's just a different flow to the game where people are okay with watching, 4 different regions at the same time and going in and out between games. Would you really want, if we ranked the 32 top teams in the country and 1 played 32 and 2 played 31 and on down the line, I would want to watch all those games. I'd want to watch every game. The first round, Alabama could be number 1 and Iowa could be number 32. I want to watch the game. I don't want there to be 8 games being played at the same time that I can't watch it because it's some crazy regional setup that I can't watch all the games because there's just too many teams playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's football, and it's about big game atmosphere, and all the games should be national, and they should be in their own time frame.
But hey, speaking of playoffs, I got an interesting question for you.
Okay.
So this kind of goes along with your top 25 that actually makes sense kind of mentality. Okay. So take away any sort of preconceived notions or bias or anything from last season. All right, just erase last season from your memory.
Yeah,
and just go by the schedules, the teams that the 2 teams I'm about to give you play, and how they're beating them.
Okay.
All right. Does Clemson have a better resume than Central Florida?
Clemson has beaten Texas A&M by 14. Cheap touchdown at the end by A&M. They annihilated Syracuse 41-6. Their first game was against, I'm blanking out on Clemson. Oh, Georgia Tech, 52-14. Okay, got it. The Georgia Tech team that lost to the Citadel is a 26-point favorite. Okay. UCF played Florida A&M 62-0. Then they played FAMU and beat them like 62-14, something like that. And then they played Stanford last week, and the final was 45-27, which speaks to a shootout. But they were up 38-7. They cruised home. They destroyed Stanford. Okay.
Right.
Well, Texas A&M is decidedly better than all those teams.
Yes, they are.
I think Texas A&M is one of the 10 to 15 best teams in the country. And this doesn't appear to be a very good Stanford team. This isn't a typical top 15 Stanford team. This is more like a top 45 team. Maybe. They're looking pretty bad. So certainly Clemson has played a more difficult schedule.
Will that still be the case for the rest of the season? The only point I'm getting at here is that the ACC is just so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no one has any notion at all that Clemson's going to lose a game until they get to January. And so it's just interesting to me that they are a sure in. And let's be honest, they would be a sure in with or without the Texas A&M game.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
All right. It doesn't matter that it's on the schedule. They are a sure in when I don't see their schedule other than the Texas A&M game being that much or even at all more difficult than the one Central Florida plays. And no one's letting Central Florida in the playoffs.
Yeah, so we had this conversation maybe before you jumped in the live stream. We just didn't take it to this extent. Somebody asked me, is Central Florida's schedule any worse than Clemson's? And I looked it up. And aside from the Texas A&M game, which really stands out as a quality opponent, it's pretty hard to distinguish those two schedules. You know, if you look at the best games on Clemson's schedule the rest of the way, Boston College, Wake Forest, NC State. NC State just lost to West Virginia by 17 points. Boston College just lost to Kansas by 24 points.
Kansas.
Yes. Like, this is who they're playing. Florida State needed a missed extra point in overtime to beat Louisiana Monroe. These are the teams on their schedule. Their schedule's pathetic. And it's not their fault, but their schedule's pathetic. South Carolina, we could make an argument that South Carolina could finish this year, with 4 or 5 wins? And they might be the best team that they're playing the rest of the season. South Carolina might be better than the rest of the teams in the ACC that Clemson plays.
I don't think there's a might. I don't think there's a might about it. I think South Carolina is going to be their toughest game.
Yes. And South Carolina could show up at that game like 4-7 easily and be the best team on Clemson's schedule.
When you take the Alabama effect into account, they likely will only have about 4 wins by the time they get there.
Sure, they still have to play A&M, then they've got to play all those juggernauts in the East. They still have Florida and Georgia and the whole deal. Yeah.
It's just interesting that just because Central Florida bears or is forced to wear, the scarlet letter, on their chest that says Group of 5, they're never going to get in. When you got again throwing out last year, because coming back as the defending title, and the defending title holder, they're not playing any better of a schedule, yet they are an absolute sure in. In fact, Clemson could drop a game inexplicably, and it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
They could still go a 12-1 ACC champion, and they're in without question, without argument.
What I find ironic, much like UCF's win against Auburn, which of course beat Georgia and Alabama, the two teams competing in the national championship that year on the same field that they beat Auburn, was that last year UCF played and beat Pitt, and they beat them worse. The team that Clemson beat in the ACC championship game, UCF beat worse than Clemson did.
UCF, if you're a betting guy, I would take UCF and lay just about any spread, because they're trying so desperately to prove themselves. They're going to run up the score every game. I would feel comfortable laying 40 points with UCF on just about any team they play.
Yeah, I hear you.
That speaks to the situation that they're in. That this popularity contest playoff system has created. I know a lot of people still want to argue against 8 teams. They say that because everyone right now argues about the 5th team didn't get in, or the 6th team didn't get in, and if you move it to 8 teams, well then the 9th team won't get in, and the 10th. I'm like, that's probably true to an extent, but the thing of it is, I really honestly think there is a gap between the 4th and 5th best team, and when you move down to the 8th and the 9th best team, it starts getting to the point where it's like, okay, come on, are you guys really arguing about this? I mean, right now that would be like, I don't know, like last year, Michigan getting in, they were around the 9th best team or something. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But not only that, in the system that I think you and I agree on, 5 automatic ins, conference champs, and then 3 wild cards. If you want to say one of those can belong to the best group of 5 team at the 8th spot, and then 2 wild cards for everyone else, fine. I think I'd prefer just 3 wild cards altogether. But the thing about that is no one really has any right to complain if their team doesn't get in with that. You know why? Because the committee would give you an automatic in, where they can't keep you out. Just win your conference. You could be a 7-6 conference, and you could have been a 7-6 Pittsburgh last year, winning the ACC, and in this system they're in with 7 wins because they won the conference. So if the committee gives you an automatic in where they can't keep you out, then you have no right to complain. If you couldn't win the conference, then you have to go to the eye test, and then it's between you and 3 other teams who will get in, and you might make it and you might not. But you wouldn't have any right at all to complain if you missed the one automatic lane to streamline you straight into the playoffs.
And that's what drives me crazy anytime I hear a playoff argument on television in which they're saying, one person's saying, well, if you have 6 teams, then the 7th team is going to argue that they should be in. They're going to be mad. If you expand it to 8, then the number 9 team. Well, the thing that they're missing when they make that stupid argument is that you're at least giving representation to everyone. You're giving representation to every conference. So there is no argument, as you're pointing out right now. If you're 11-1 LSU and you have earned it, even though you're not a conference champion, to be considered and given entry into the playoff as a wild card, good for you. But if you're 11-1 LSU and for whatever reason you don't win the conference and you're not selected, you have no gripe, because at least there's representation. There's representation for every conference. And that's what's left out of these stupid arguments that these idiots make all the time that I hear on television. And they just say, well, if we go to 8 teams, the 9th team is going to be mad and there's going to be an argument that we should expand it to 9. No, you've got representation for everyone. It's like the NFL playoffs. We don't leave conferences out or divisions out because there's no argument then, because you have the opportunity tangibly to make it to the playoff. You have a path that is defined and structured within the system to say, this is the way you can definitely earn a spot in the playoff. No arguments, no debate. You do this, you're in the playoff.
And not only that, but professional sports have shown us that people like the wild card system. No one argues against the baseball teams who get in the playoffs on a wild card. Everyone's actually kind of watching it at the end because it's interesting when someone's already when someone's already claimed a spot, and then you got these other 2 teams over here, batting it out for a wild card spot. It's actually interesting, but no one complains about it. People like it. So it just seems silly to me that everyone's, not everyone,
people on TV seem to think that this would cause either an equal amount or even more controversy. And the other argument they want to use is that it would make too many football games. No, you would end up having the teams who made the finals play 16 games, but that doesn't mean it has to stretch farther into January. You just move the playoffs up 1 week or 2 weeks. So maybe you have a week in between each round, so you would end up having 3 nights. The the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals. It doesn't mean it has to stretch into the spring semester just because you add an extra round of the playoffs. That's such a silly argument. I mean, give me a break. Yeah, but until they finally pull the trigger on this, it's just going to be guys like you and me, wishful thinking, right?
That's it, reasonable Gump. Well, I got a couple questions to answer here, and then we're going to call it a night. So I appreciate you calling.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
Captain Trips, thank you so much for your patience. I saw your contribution. I appreciate it so much. Again, I do not expect anyone to contribute monetarily, but if you do, understand this. I'm close to 14,000 subscribers here. I've got a Miami channel, Ohio State, and USC. Total, I've got about 17,000 subscribers, and I've got a mic that's too loose, but I've got about 17,000 subscribers. Therefore, if people would contribute $1 or $2 here and there, then we could get to a point where we go full time. So that's the goal. So I appreciate you understanding the vision, Captain Tripp. So you asked, what games am I interested in watching tomorrow? What games am I locked in on? So if I could only watch one game tomorrow, I know a lot of people would fill in the blank as Georgia Notre Dame because that is the headliner of sorts. But I believe the best game, the game that I really want to see tomorrow, is Michigan-Wisconsin. That would be the one game that I would watch over any game tomorrow. Game number 2, because of the cachet, the name brands, and because of the intrigue of seeing Notre Dame give it another go on the elite stage against a big team, would be Notre Dame and Georgia, even though I think there's a possibility, a solid possibility, that Georgia runs away and wins that game 38-14. And of course, you can get my predictions down at the Voice of College Football community. The links in the description sections of the videos. And I'm 45-28 against the spread. Let's see if I could watch a third game. The third game that I've got my eye on would be Texas A&M and Auburn. I think that's going to be an exceptional game. 2 teams that are trying to move their way into the upper echelon of the SEC. Texas A&M failed their test at Clemson. Not just that they lost, but they lost badly. They were controlled and dominated through most of the stretches of that game. Auburn, of course, pulled it out against Oregon. That was a huge win for the program and Gus Malzahn and quarterback Bo Nix. So now we get to see Bo Nix on the road as a freshman in his first test against a hostile crowd and a Texas A&M defense that is much better than what we saw under the leadership of Kevin Sumlin. Jimbo Fisher has upgraded the Texas A&M defense considerably. A Kevin Sumlin defense against Clemson would have given up 150 or 75 yards to Travis Etienne. And that didn't happen to Jimbo Fisher's defense. The offense played like garbage, but Texas A&M held up well physically. They were in the game in terms of blocking and tackling. Clemson just made plays on the perimeter. And Texas A&M had poor quarterback play from Kellen Mond. He chose that game to be scattershot Kellen Mond. And the wide receiver core, which I think is a top 5 to 10 unit in the nation, didn't show up. So my games of the week would be Michigan, Wisconsin, number 1. Number 2 game I would watch above anything else would be Georgia, Notre Dame. And number 3 would be Texas A&M and Auburn. After that, just for kind of tradition's sake, Tennessee, Florida, I will be looking in on that game at noon. I usually have 3 or 4 screens available to me, so I will go front and center with Wisconsin, Michigan at noon. but I'll be checking in on Florida, Tennessee. I think there are some other good noon games. Northwestern, Michigan State I'm interested in. Of course, Texas, Oklahoma State at night. I don't know a ton about the Cowboys. I want to see them play for the first time. I, of course, saw the entire Texas LSU game, and Texas is a bit beat up in the secondary and could really be challenged by Oklahoma State. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's George.
Hey, George. What's up?
I am so happy. I'm so happy. I'm the most elated human being on earth. I'm elated.
Well, it must be because you're anticipating Kyle Trask throwing 7 touchdowns tomorrow.
Yes, or 3 or 2 or 1, or as long as we win by 1 point. I mean, I think we got this by 1 point or more.
Okay. Considering my play on tomorrow's game, I'll take that.
You took Florida at 14. That's insane. Are you crazy?
That's not what I said.
Giving up 14 points?
That's not what I said, George. You said you said that you were content with winning by 1 point, and I said that would be perfectly fine with me.
But I thought you gave up the points and took Florida.
No, you said you would be content with winning by 1 point.
I bet my whole net worth. I thought you were taking the points, and I bet my whole net worth on Florida. You better hope we win by 14, or I'm out of $700.
Oh, then we'll start a campaign on here for you, George. We'll raise it.
You're right. We'll do it. You're right. We'll do a super chat for George. All right. I think. Hey, Jim McElwain, our former coach, is playing Miami tomorrow. Is that like predestined or what? Jim McElwain versus Miami versus Manny Diaz at Central Michigan. The Chippewas versus the Hurricanes. Hey, that's always a big-time game we get up for, isn't it? Hurricanes and the Chippewas.
Yeah, it's a huge one. Let me tell you. It is a big one.
My God.
Absolutely.
I don't see any way the Chippewas cover the spread. Do you?
I can't say that I really care. They lost by 61 to Wisconsin.
I saw that because I care, about Jim McElwain. I watched that. I think he has been sent to coaching hell.
Well, that's what happens to coaches. They get their one shot in the big time, and they can't make it. They're relegated to places like Central Michigan.
I was really mad when they fired him. I was the only Florida Gator that was mad. I was like, give the guy 5 years, And now I'm like even afraid to admit that.
Well, you just did in front of millions.
Literally millions of people. Don't lie. Don't be shy. Millions of people. I was on the internet saying I will never cheer for the Gators again if you do this. Like, leave McElwain alone. Give him a chance. Yeah. But he wouldn't fire that guy Nussmeier.
You don't even have enough respect for the guy to pronounce his name correctly.
Jim McElwain and Nussmeier. I don't have my false teeth in. Don't blame me for that.
All right, George. You've got a game. So you've got a.
59 is the new.
Yeah, go ahead.
59 is the new 80. I'm an old guy.
If you say so.
I made that up. It's pretty funny.
Oh, you make up a lot of things that are pretty funny, George. I got to hand it to you.
Hey, listen, my whole life has come down to supporting Uncle Lou and Mark Rogers and Pigskin Pete and Volunteer Roadshow.
That's awesome.
And Junior and the Big Dog. Oh my God, you got to tie in with these Miami dudes, man.
Okay, I'm not familiar with them.
You know them?
I am not familiar with them. No.
Yeah, Junior and the Big Dog. Oh my God, Mark, it's good. Hey, look, nothing against Alonzo Cam, but I promise you are going to start having them on instead because they're just the bomb. The bomb.
Okay.
Shit, whatever you call it.
Maybe we'll give them a shot.
Thanks. Love you, man.
All right, George. Thanks, man. Appreciate the help, man. And you take it easy. And I know you got to get up early tomorrow because your game's on at noon Eastern.
I love you more I love you more, and I'm sick and tired of asking people to like, subscribe, and share. I say just give me a $1 or $2 super chat. I don't care if you like or subscribe or share. Just $1 super chat me.
Very cool.
I mean, you have 200 people on there. Screw Google and YouTube. Send me $1.
Well, yeah, we should really look into that. I need to organize that because, the way they filter that out.
Mess up the algorithm. They can cost you your likes and they can cost you everything, but they can't mess up your super chat. I don't think yet. Maybe. All right.
All right, George.
Serious.
Thanks for the call, man.
Later. Bye.
The incomparable George. Captain Trips, thank you so much for the contribution. That's very nice of you. I think, again, man, Captain Trips gets it. And I don't know the financial situation of people out there. If you just love the content and just kick back and watch, that's all I ask for. Give me the views. But if you understand what we're trying to do here, we do things like, put several, actually what it turned out to be was thousands of dollars into a microphone here, and then the audio and video equipment that we took on the road to Orlando, and obviously the cost to travel down there to go to the Miami, Florida game, and also to build the channel. All right, let's talk some more college football before we call it a night. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Yo, Mark, it's Deep Barat. How's it going?
Deep Barat, how are you?
Lovely. Tomorrow's an exciting day of college football.
Yes.
But how about them USC Trojans, bro? USC just upset Utah. And not only am I happy because I think my Longhorns are going up in the polls, but someone gave me 5-1 that Utah was going to beat USC. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to take USC. I think that they're a really good team at home. Utah hasn't won. And I just made some betting money. So that is a huge good start to my weekend, I guess. But I was telling you, man, some of these people in the sports betting world have no idea what's going on.
Well, I don't know if you're running into actual people in the sports betting world. They're in your sports betting world. Those are not people in the sports betting world, because anybody who's giving anybody 5-1 odds on a Utah USC game is a complete moron.
Yeah, this was one of those, like, how do I put it? Utah Utes retiree, lifelong Utah fan. He's just like, my Utes are going to go run the table and, make the Pac-12 championship with 12-1 or 13-0, and they're just going to steamroll this shitty USC team. I'm so confident I'm giving you 5-1. I'm like, okay, whatever. But granted, I mean, this guy could have afforded the loss and everything. It was just, for him, it was just $2,500. But, I mean, I just think that was ridiculous. And I'm like, I would bet more, but I could only afford that much at the time. And, I made a little bit of money. It's not a bad start to the weekend. But
that's right.
Holy shit, man. But yeah, speaking of which, tomorrow's an exciting game. Michigan and what is that other team? Wisconsin. I think that there's a lot of good money to be made on Michigan. As much as I don't like Michigan, whatever, I do think that they might have, I think they could win, but I also think the spread is a little bit too high for Wisconsin. I don't buy the 3.5. What about you? What are your thoughts on that game?
You can get my picks. You can either go in the description section, grab the link,
right.
or you can text 474747 and type in the keyword football. You get all my picks for free. There you go.
The last question I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on the Pac-12 this year? Do you think it's another cannibal year? Do you think they have any teams?
Yes.
A legitimate shot?
A legitimate shot. The best teams in the conference, I think, have already lost.
Yeah, Stanford is eliminated.
I'm thinking Oregon and Utah off the top of my head, and Washington. Yeah, I think it's going to continue to cannibalize itself. Yes. We have built a playoff system that rewards leagues that have one dominant team and that can crush the rest of the league, rather than rewarding leagues that are deeper with
but I think
more balance.
The ACC, I think every Power 5 league is extremely competitive. I won't say extremely competitive, but very competitive. Obviously, you have
I don't know that the SEC has been extremely competitive in recent years. Alabama's dominated the conference generally for 10 years and specifically for the last 5.
Yeah, I mean, I was referring to Georgia's recent rise. That LSU is really good. Auburn is okay, but they've had a good year.
Yeah, the league's really good. It's the best league. Those teams are legitimate top to 10 to 12 teams in the nation, but Alabama has completely owned the conference, shut it down. LSU, we're talking about how good LSU's been. They lost to Alabama 29-0. The game wasn't even a contest last year. So until something changes, the SEC has not been competitive. It's not a competitive league for a championship. Is it competitive 2 through 6, 2 through 8? Absolutely it is. Is it the best conference in college football? Absolutely it is. But in terms, unless something changes this year, it has not been competitive in winning the championship.
Now, let's say that you take like a team like Clemson, right? You put them in the SEC. Do you think they'd go undefeated?
No.
You think they'd have at least one loss? One more?
I'm losing you.
Oh, I was going to say, like, if you put a team like Clemson in the
no, I heard
SEC,
you.
they'd probably
I think they lose.
Have 1 or 2 losses or more. But I think Clemson would still be really good in the SEC.
Sure, they would.
If they were put in the SEC, they would probably still win the conference. Last year they would have won the conference because they beat Alabama outright. Maybe, who knows? Maybe Georgia could have pulled a random upset. I mean, we don't really know until they play these games, right? But yeah, I completely agree with you that the ACC is basically a basketball conference. They have a lot of really good basketball depth, but they don't have any football depth. But I would argue with you, Mark Rogers, that in the past, the ACC has been very good. Like FSU, Virginia Tech, there have been some good teams in that conference in the past. It's not like it's been like a completely one-team conference forever. Or has it? Georgia Tech even had a few good years.
So you're wanting me to weigh in on this?
Yeah, sure.
So you stated that in such a way that I've made that statement in the past, which I have not.
You have not, no. But it's a sad story, really. I think the ACC will probably be Clemson's league for years to come, looking at the recruiting classes. No one is really recruiting to Clemson's level in that league, not even top 20 recruiting classes.
So the ACC, ever since it's been established, and even past that, in looking at the last 25 years, once Florida State was added, it's generally been one of the 2 worst conferences in college football, almost consistently. It's been one of the worst 2 conferences. Now, there was a time about 3 or 4 years ago in which there were 3 or 4 strong seasons out of the ACC because Miami was decent, Florida State was really good, NC State was much better, and Virginia Tech was good. North Carolina was even good. So 2013, 14, 15, in that range, the ACC had more than just Clemson and then this enormous drop-off to a bunch of teams that are the 30th and 40th best teams in the country. There were legitimate other top 10 teams, other top 15 and 25 teams, but that doesn't exist now.
Yeah, that is very true. I just, looking at it now, man, it looks like it's Clemson's conference for the next 4 years, maybe longer, who knows. But nobody's playing or recruiting to Clemson's level. It's kind of like a sad story for that conference. I would think that at least, Syracuse should get like a top 20 recruiting class, but they're not even in the picture, really. So it's a bit of an unfortunate scenario. But the Pac-12, man, last statement I want to hear, and then I'll let you go. What are your thoughts on the future of the Pac-12? Do you think that conference will eventually make the college football playoff again. They'll be a good team. It's kind of like this cannibalistic kind of nature is going to continue for at least a few more years.
Well, USC is the best opportunity to be dominant, to be elite in that conference. But we've seen other teams do it in a given year, whether they truly were elite or they at least gained entry into the playoff. Of course, Washington and Oregon. Oregon was an elite program from about 2008 to 14. So I believe that there are a number of issues facing the Pac-12. They have issues, they have money issues, they have television rights issues, they have issues in recruiting because outside of California, there's a dearth of players. They have issues with perception. They have issues with their fan bases not giving a damn in many areas. They have issues with time zone restrictions that are impossible to overcome. They can get creative, which I think featuring games on Thursday and Friday night is one way to do it, like they did tonight. They owned college football tonight, and certainly not as many people are going to be watching college football just organically on a Friday night than a Saturday night. But on a Saturday night, you've got to compete against 5 or 6 other games. So they owned the viewing audience tonight. So I think that's a good move for the Pac-12 because otherwise they're restricted in what they can do from a time zone standpoint to gain the attention of the nation. So all those things I just listed are obstacles and challenges for the Pac-12 that they've not done a good job in overcoming. So I would be shocked if they would ever become the best conference in college football. Will they have college football playoff teams? Absolutely, they will. Just sheer probabilities say that they will have teams that will go undefeated or have one loss and make it to the college football playoff. That may not be the 4th best team in the country, but they're going to gain entry into the playoff, just like Washington did the last time they had a team in 2016.
That would probably be next year at the best, if next year.
Yes.
I think this year, this is...
Yeah, I think they're
over.
done.
I don't think Washington State is going undefeated or one loss.
Yeah, they're done.
USC is not going with one loss the rest of the way. But I think USC might win 8 or 9 games this year. I think they might improve, actually, from what they were last year.
Yeah.
Clay Helton might not even be on the hot seat anymore. Who knows? But it's looking like Clay is doing some things to keep his job so far. But who knows, right? It's still a long season. Maybe Utah goes bowlless. They're not as good of a team as we thought they were. There's a whole list of variables and possibilities that can happen. But one possibility that is very likely to happen, because you mentioned all these teams with a loss already, that they might not make the playoff anymore. I would caution, though, that Oregon still has a shot of making the playoff if they go run the table.
Sure.
I don't think they'll run the table. But they're looking like, I think, the best team in the Pac-12 right now on the eye test, the quarterback and the players and everything.
I'd agree.
But they do have to travel. They do have to travel to Washington, and that'll be a very tricky game. If they lose that game, it's over. And Washington, they get the chance to play Oregon, so they might, have a shot if they go 12-1. But realistically, like you said, these teams will have to play each other. They'll beat each other up. And it's a sad story, but I mean that is the reality of the Pac-12 conference right now.
Well, of course, the best thing that could happen for Oregon, in addition to taking care of business themselves, is for Auburn to have a good season. I'm not going to go crazy and say Auburn's going to go 12-0 or 11-1, but let's say they go 10-2, and they're a top 7 to 10 team in the country, and Oregon can at least point to that game and say, "We lost." But look at how we lost and how we competed. We were on that field for 60 minutes with that team, and we were just as good as they were. So they can point to that as a admirable effort that they didn't get blown out on a big stage against a big team. That's if Auburn can post a good season.
Right. But also, I don't think the committee would view it that negatively or that bad, considering the type of loss they had. It was a very close loss. And also, it was week 1 of the football season. So if Oregon runs the table, which is very unlikely, but let's just say they go 12-1. I think they have a very good case of getting in. But like, it's even better, like you said, if Auburn is a very good team. But the fact that it was a week 1 loss, I think that'll help them a lot in terms of, recency bias and winning the conference and just so many different variables. But I think a 12-1 Pac-12 team would get in over a 2-loss SEC team, or maybe even a 1-loss at-large SEC team because they're not a conference champion. But who knows, right? I mean, the committee's done some weird things, but they've stuck by that conference champion rule, and I think that should probably continue heading down the line. But
they have.
Anyways, they have, haven't they? I mean, what I mean to say is that like a 12-1 conference champion has never been left out over a 1-loss at-large non-conference team. The year that Alabama got into the playoff as a 1-loss at-large SEC team in 2017, Ohio State won the Big Ten with 2 losses, and they got Iowa. Last year they got Purdue, but the year before that they got
sure.
Iowa.
But there have been 3 consecutive years in which the committee chose an at-large team over a conference champion.
Yeah, that's true. The other year was Notre Dame going undefeated, and they had a quality win with Michigan, who is arguably the second best Big Ten team.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the third year? I can't think of a third year. Was there a third year?
So they left out Penn State. They took Ohio State over Penn State. So they took an at-large over the Big Ten champion. They were 11-2.
Exactly, and Ohio State was what, 11-1, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's the thing. Like the 2-loss thing is the big point I want to make there. I think that the moment you have a 2-loss conference champion, I think it makes it difficult to put them into the college football playoff over any 1-loss team with a good resume. It's always obviously subject to a lot of debate and statistics and analytics and looking at strength of record versus strength of schedule, quality wins, quality losses, etc. But yeah, man, I think the 1-loss conference champion rule has held up till now. Now, the interesting point, and this is the last thing I want to make, is if Texas goes 12-1, but LSU is 11-1, but LSU beat Texas head-to-head, who gets in? Or is that just automatically 1-loss conference champion, Big 12, get in over 11-1 SEC team?
Are you asking what I would do or what they're going to do? We don't know what they're going to do. They do whatever they want.
But that's an interesting debate, right? I mean,
sure it is. Yep.
What would you do?
I would.
You're laughing at this.
Well, I think that the system's ridiculous. That's why. So I hate to confine myself to the system. But if they elected me to the committee and I had to work within the confines of the system, and let's say they both just play magnificent football the rest of the season and dominate their schedules reasonably so.
Like LSU's only loss is Alabama, and Texas's only loss is LSU.
Yeah. Let's say LSU goes to Alabama and loses 24-21. I'm going to honor the conference championship.
Okay, that's respectable. So you're going to stick by that conference champion, and it makes sense, right? I mean, you win your conference. That makes it a good case to get into the college football playoff. But that's a heartbreak for Penn State, man. I mean, I'm not a Penn State fan or an Ohio State fan. That's a pretty big heartbreak if you win the conference, especially the Big Ten, and you probably beat Ohio State that year. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Penn State beat Ohio State that year, and they still got left out. That's probably ridiculous. But to their case, they did have 2 losses, so But anyways, man, I appreciate you taking the call. Tomorrow's going to be a big night of games. I'm probably going to, catch you tomorrow if you have a call-in show. It's going to be interesting because I'm sure you're going to give your insights and analysis on a lot of the games. But yeah, I mean, go Badgers, man. I hope that they take care of Michigan tomorrow. That's going to be a big game for the entire country. Take it easy, Mark.
All right, Deeper Rod. Thanks for the call, man. All right, folks. So yeah, it's 2:22 a.m. Eastern time. I am not going to bed, but I'm getting off here, and we'll pack it in at some point. Of course, we'll be back with analysis all day tomorrow. Instant analysis on all the big games. You can count on that. Live streams in the prime time and in the late night hours as well. Just look out for those notifications. Again, if you want my predictions, you got two ways to do it. You can go to the description section of any of the videos, grab the link next to the comment Voice of College Football community, grab that link, sign up right there, you get my predictions. 45 and 28 against the spread. Do the math, it makes a lot of money. 45 and 28 against the spread. You can also, for this week or for one time, you can text 474747, keyword football, you get my predictions right there. You'll see at the top that I took USC +4 against Utah. That obviously isn't going to do you much good right now, but then you've got the rest of the predictions for the top 25 games and other games, about 27 or 28 predictions on Saturday. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thank you, because if you don't participate, this doesn't exist. So thank you so much for your support, your contributions. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow for a big college football week 4 Saturday.